I was 24, and I got a phone call from someone saying, "Congratulations, you won a trip to Orlando." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I did. It was the first time I've ever won anything in my life like this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do it." It's like, "Yeah, you get like 4 days in Orlando, and you can go to like Universal Studios, and then we're going to send you on a 3-day cruise." I'm like, "This is awesome." And they're like, "Yeah, we just need your credit card number." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds normal." And so I gave my credit card number, and I paid for a trip I won. And I realized when my wife got home, she's like, "Yo, you just got scammed." But just so you know, it was actually a really great vacation. I just had to pay for it. This past week on our Instagram, through our Insta stories, we asked you, what is something you've been scammed on? And a few of you had some like super funny responses. One really weird thing though is that the majority of you said my boyfriend. So many people were like, "My boyfriend, he scammed me out of my life," right? Like it is over and over again. I'm like, how many of these do we share? It's weird. I don't know if you know this, but like, I guess there's I think it's over, something that's some weird number, like 40-some million dollars is actually conned from people in Canada every year. But they say that's only about 5% of people who are actually scammed, who actually report it. And they say the estimates could be up to $3 billion a year. Canadians are scammed out of money. Do you know what the number one scam is? Romance scams. Yeah, $22 million has been lost by Canadians in romance scams. So basically people are like, they call them kind of like these romance phishing scams where someone, contacts you. It's like, "Hey, I'm looking for love," right? And you're like, "Hey, me too." And they say all the right things and you end up like sending some money to help them because they're in some sort of situation, right? And they say that estimated every person who's scammed in romance scam, okay, listen, this is a crazy number. They estimate that each person loses, on average, $30,000 to romance scams. And they know that because of the shame and the guilt involved in it, that there's a very, very small number of people that actually report being scammed in romance scams. So it could be way, way higher. It is, I don't know about you see some emails, right, where like you get the, deposed king, right, of Nigeria telling you like, "Or I've got money I want to store in your bank account." And, the second biggest scam in Canada is actually tax scams. And that doesn't even come close to the romance scams. But not just that, even just technology and social media. Here's really interesting. In some of my research, this is some things that you hear. So from former Google employee Tristan Harris says this: they carefully engineer their products, especially the versions readily available through apps on your phone, to exploit psychological weak spots to trap you into compulsive use. So let me give you an example of this. When you go on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, what do you have to do to refresh your page? You can answer. Pull down, right? You pull down. Do you know why they have you pull down? It's the exact same motion as a slot machine. And there's a sense where like you never know if what you're going to see next is going to be worth your time. And so that's how they do it. Cal Newport, in his Digital Minimalism book, says this: few want to spend so much time online, but these tools have a way of cultivating behavioral addiction. If you've ever looked into the stats on how often we go into Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, it's incredible. Like you read it and you're like, "Oh man, like I got a problem," right? And I think all of us do. I think all of us have been at a restaurant where you kind of hang out with friends and you realize you've never talked to each other. You literally are just like, "Huh." Right? Like you're on your phone the whole time, or there's that family, right? And man, this is a problem. I actually think this is something we all know. And so you think through these scams, think of all these ways that they're kind of trying to get at us and exploit us. And they're using all these, like I said, that romance scam is like they tell you what you want to hear and they know what they're doing. You think to yourself, like, how could we fall for this stuff? Like, aren't we smarter than this? Are we smarter than to be scammed out of this money? Or, why can't I control something? And it's a huge issue. And I think a big problem is that we're actually always in a rush. We want to rush through school. We want to rush through our problem, our circumstance. We kind of want to rush to another relationship or rush to another stage of our life. We're always moving. We're always wanting to go somewhere more or somewhere else. And we want to get there fast. We are filled with so much information. Like you go to Google and you can literally have the world at your hands. If there's any problem, you can just Google it. Like, why does she not like me anymore? And Google will give you an answer. It's crazy. Now, Google can answer your phone for you, called Screen Call. And then technology kind of compounds this desire for us to move fast, to get more as fast as we can whenever we can. Like, it's no wonder, like, we are such in a rush. It's kind of like we're skimming our life. And we're so distracted. We're always moving towards something more and knowing something more. It's no wonder that we don't have time to stop and think, am I being exploited? Is there something else going on? There is another reason too, and I don't want you to be weirded out, but I'm going to tell you, it may sound weird at first, but just go with me on it. There is this very particular verse written by this guy named Paul in this book called Ephesians in the Bible, in the New Testament. It says this, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." Now, let me explain this. I don't want to sound crazy. I don't want to over-spiritualize something, but if I was your enemy, if I wanted to destroy your life, you know what I wouldn't do? I wouldn't be like under your bed. Well, one could be super illegal and a bit creepy. But, I wouldn't just jump out of your closet and be like, bah! And you're like, that was good. You scared me, right? Like, I wouldn't want to make it obvious. The best enemies are the ones that can take something really good and change it enough so you don't notice that what is really good is actually entangling you. I'll give you an example of this. According to the Pew Research Center, smartphone ownership crossed the 50% threshold in late 2012, right when teen depression and suicide began to increase. By 2015, 73% of teens had access to a smartphone. Not only did smartphone use and depression increase in tandem, but time spent online was linked to mental health issues across 2 different data sets. If I were to destroy your life, I wouldn't make it obvious. I'd use things like our desire for more and to push on to the next, and even technology and what we have, and I would use it, something good, and twist it enough to maybe, just maybe, start slowly destroying you. This is why I think maybe it's not so crazy to think what Paul said, that maybe in a rush of everything, there's something wrong going on, something sinister. This month, there has been this invitation from Jesus, come follow me. This invitation of Jesus to us is an invitation to you. So I would like you to add your name to that. Come follow me, Thomas. Come follow me, Ezrael. Come follow me, Mark. Come follow me, Samantha. Whatever your name is, it is an invitation for you. But then I got to ask this question of you. Who are you? Do you have a good sense of who you are as a person? What the invitation to follow Jesus would even look like? Because here's the thing, statistically, this is who you are. In all our business in a hurry, in everything we have, in all the technology and all the advancements, in all the rush of it, here's who statistically you are. You are more lonely, more depressed, burnt out, exhausted, confused, and unfinished than you've ever been in your life. This generation has the highest load of debt, highest load of mental ill health issues. But aren't we getting better? Whatever you call it. It's this essential you and me that seems to be squirming under the burdens of too much to do and too much to think about. We're a plant which is frequently moved but never grows strong. See, my fear is that we're losing you. And I personally have an issue with that. And I actually think Jesus has a huge issue with that. Under the load of everything that you bear, I think there's something going on, and because of that, we're losing you. This come follow me that Jesus invites us to, like I said, is about you, but I need to warn you. There's an annoying aspect of this invitation. Honestly, like if you ever read Jesus and you're super annoyed by him, hey, listen, I'm in the same boat. There's things that he says, things that he does that just feel like, why are you saying that? It makes things super hard. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, I'll be honest with you, is easy to understand, but extremely difficult to put in practice, but it has the power to completely revolutionize your life. And I don't mean that as like a pyramid scheme salesperson, right? And if you invite someone to it and they invite someone else to it, that's not what I'm trying to say. See, the annoying part of Jesus' life is this. If you were to read his life, if there's one word you can sum up Jesus' entire ministry with, his entire life with, if I can sum it up, it would be this word, unhurried. It didn't mean that he wasn't busy. I mean, have you read this guy's life? There's always these crowds coming around him, always listening. He was always being challenged. I mean, they didn't hang him because they liked him, right? Like, he was busy, but he was also unhurried. We're okay with him giving us a new situation in life. We're okay with him maybe even changing our significant other, right? Because it's always their problem, right? Like, we're okay with Jesus even giving us a new slate to walk free from. We're okay when Jesus heals us. But here's the thing. Jesus also wants to change your pace. He's going to interrupt your normal. The way of Jesus is going to move you from a hurried life to an unhurried one. And it's going to be hard. Why? Because following Jesus is actually never done in a hurry. One of the biggest things I hear from a lot of people is like, man, like I want to know Jesus, but I can't hear him. And it's like trying to move so fast and I want to do this thing and this thing, this thing. And I'm like, stop. If you are super anxious about following Jesus, you've got Jesus wrong. He's not hurried. If you're setting the pace of your walk with Jesus, you're not following Jesus well. If he's always trailing behind you, you're not following Jesus, I think you're following yourself. And one thing I've learned about Jesus over the years is this, that he'll wait for you to wait for him. But unless we do that, we're going to miss him. Why? Because Jesus is never rushed. But he knows you are. And isn't this the hardest part about Jesus? Is that he knows you, but he also knows what you need. He's teaching them, he's teaching us through his life a new way to understand him, a new way to understand yourself, and a new way to understand other people. And here's the thing, those are three things that I feel like we're losing touch on. Even if you don't follow Jesus in this room, I seriously think we're still losing this. We're losing a sense of who he is. Like, you need to know this, like in the Christian world, there's never been a time where you can have access to more information about the Bible and about Jesus and about all these, you can learn so much. I mean, you can even get a Bible with your name written on it in any way you want. If you want it to look like a Bible character, if you want it to look like SpongeBob, you can. My son has a comic book Bible, and you're like, yo, where can I get that? Do you know statistically, though, that there is more biblically illiterate people today than there ever was? And it's only been in the past couple centuries that we've actually had that modern people, the majority of them, are actually literate. If you talk about things like Bible memory, you're like, that sounds super old. Are you going to pull out the flannel board too and, show Jesus on the donkey, right? We're losing touch on ourselves. Like I said, we're lonely, we're broken. Things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. And others, this is one way that I find social media what it has done is like it's allowed us to turn people off we don't want to hear. And so we create this kind of utopian idea of others where it's like, if you don't fit into this is why you hear the idea of like, hey, if they're bad for you, drop them, right? Like there is this sense where it's like, you can turn a voice off, you can control that. That's not the way that we're meant to live among each other. Here's the thing, here's what the sinister enemy's gonna do. It's to destroy peace between you and God, peace with yourself, and the peace you have with other people. And the whole story of Scripture is to reconcile those things back together. And so if something is destroying those things, shouldn't we pay attention to it? And this is why Jesus sets a whole new pace. See, following Jesus will always seem counterintuitive. Why? Because good medicine often requires us to give up trying on our own and finally trust someone who may know better than us. What I'm going to ask you to do tonight will be one of the hardest things you can do. But seeing it done in my own life and the lives of those around me who've taken certain challenges, it has been a huge overhaul in how we've been thinking about God, ourselves, and other people. We're losing something of great value, a way of thinking and moving through time that can be summed up in a single word: depth. Depth of thought and feeling, depth in our relationships, our work, and everything we do. Since depth is what makes life fulfilling and meaningful, it's astounding that we're allowing this to happen. But here's the thing: depth is actually never achieved in a hurry. To be fully aware of God, to be fully aware of yourself and the people around you requires depth. And depth is actually only achieved when we are no longer in a hurry. The only way the enemy and pressures of this world won't be able to exploit you is if you just unhurry yourself. That is the pace of Jesus. What if I told you that Jesus' burden is light, easy, that his movement is one of peace, of this long-term, all-life journey of not being hurried together? Man, that sounds so good. That is the pace of Jesus. That is the invitation to follow him, is not to be hurried, but to let him be unhurried with you. I wonder how much difference that would make in our life, but more than that, in our world. There is this section, this parable, this story that Jesus shares. I mean, if you've never been confronted or introduced to stories of Jesus, a lot of his teachings are done in what are called parables. They're just like analogies. They're teaching something. And he uses earth so much. Why? And this is one thing. Jesus is never like way out there and you're like, oh my goodness, what are you saying? Like, he uses earth. He uses the things around us all the time. And so he does this. And I want to read a story to you. It's reading time with Thomas, okay? Mark chapter 4, 1-20. It's a lot of verses. I'll show them to you as we go through it, but I just want to read the passage to you. And this is what it says. Once again, Jesus began teaching by the lake shore. A very large crowd soon gathered around him, so he got into a boat. Then he sat in the boat while all the people remained on the shore. He taught them. Here's a funny thing. So oftentimes he would go by the water. Do you know why? Because like when your voice carries better over water. It's interesting. So you'll actually see a lot of times Jesus speaking around water. It's because he can speak to larger crowds that way. Anyways. He taught them by telling many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen, a farmer went out to plant some seed. As he scattered it across his field, some of the seeds fell on a footpath and the birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seed sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plant soon wilted in the hot sun, and since it didn't have deep roots, it died. Other seeds fell among thorns and grew up and choked out the tender plants, so they produced no grain. Still other seeds fell on fertile soil, and they sprouted, grew, and produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Then he said, anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Later, when Jesus was alone with his 12 disciples and the others who were gathered around, they asked him what the parables meant. He replied, you're permitted to understand the secret of the kingdom of God, but I use parables for everything I say to outsiders. So the scriptures might be fulfilled. When they see what I do, they will learn nothing. When they hear what I say, they will not understand. Otherwise, they will turn to me and be forgiven. There are some interesting pieces to this. I want to break it down for you. So here's something I want to notice. Automatically, if you were sitting with Jesus and he shared this parable, they'd be like, well, who's the good soil? How do I know when you are going to say something, Jesus, that I'm the kind of person that's actually going to not only hear it, but understand it, and it's going to change, it's going to produce fruit in me? How do I know that's going to be me? And Jesus being Jesus, he says, well, it's the good soil. The farmer plants seed by taking God's word to others. Now I understand, okay, word. A lot of the people, especially if you grew up in church, this idea of word is like, this is the word. I don't know if you know this, but like Mark, like Jesus wasn't reading from Mark when he spoke. Word is this. I want to give you an understanding of what he means here. Word is the idea of like when you read the creation account, it says that God spoke and earth came into existence. When he breathed into Adam, it brought life into Adam. John 1, it's another story of Jesus' life and words. It says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. It's Jesus himself. The idea he's saying is like, when you're actually taking him in, the power that animates your life, that changes you, that transforms you. So it's not just some word from God, you're actually those who can receive Jesus himself, those who can receive his life and animate change and transformation. That's what he's getting across. So who are those people who will receive him? How do we know? And he says, well, still other seeds fell on fertile soil and they sprouted, grew, and produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as has been planted. That's awesome. Well, how do we know I'm that person? Well, then he said, anyone with ears to hear. All right, that's it. And he says, should listen and understand. He breaks it down later on. In Mark 4:20, he says this. Later, when Jesus was alone, 10, told disciples, and with the others who were gathered around, they asked him what the parables meant. This is what Jesus means when he says something like, those who listen and understand, who hear. We all have ears. What's the difference? When he was alone, the disciples drew away from the crowd and sat with him. This is a huge piece. This action is actually monumental. And this is what Jesus is getting at. He's setting the stage for it. Their hearts were open to him. They followed him out of the noise and out of the crowd to hear him, to know who they were. Hey, listen, I want to know what you mean by this. So when you draw away, Jesus, I'm going to draw away with you, and I'm going to ask you, who am I? How do I know who you are, and how do I know who I am? I want to be that person. And so in verse 20, Jesus says, and the seeds that fell on good soil represents those who hear and accept God's word and produce a harvest of 36 or even 100 times as much as has been planted. Now, the word accept is not like, I agree with you. The word accept literally means for you to take it in, to think about it, and let it saturate your soul and your heart and your mind so that it produces change. The context that he's speaking to at this point here is that there's a lot of people who heard, but very few people were willing to follow him. Very few people were willing to move out of the noise of the crowd and to unhurry themselves with Jesus. And this is what Jesus meant, where he says, like, those who have ears to hear will hear. Or it's like the secret has been open to you. He's giving the answer, saying, you know why it's been open to you? Because you've unhurried yourself. You came and sought me. Because here's the thing, his longing in verse 12 is that all of us would be forgiven. That if we just had ears to hear, if we just had eyes to see, then we could know this forgiving life of Jesus. If only we unhurried ourselves. And here's what happens here. In this situation, they get a revelation of who God is. He's explaining who he is, of what he means, of what he's speaking. They get time away with him. They spend some close time with him. They get a revelation of who they are. Listen, this is who you are. This is who you may be. And this is where you should aim to be at. So he's giving a bit of a condition of your soul. Gives them a better understanding of who they are, and then he also gives them a better understanding of other people. He says that you bear fruit. Let me ask you a question. Do trees eat its own fruit? No, that would be cannibalism. Trees are meant to bear fruit for the nourishment of other people. He gives them a new understanding of who he is, of who they are, and of who other people are. Why? Because they unhurried themselves. This is probably why. Here's the thing. I don't know if you heard this, but Jesus didn't live a life just to live a life. He actually lived a life to show you what life should look like following him. And this is one of the reasons why when you read through the Gospels, you hear this all the time. Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. Half probably because he was super annoyed at people not listening to him, but I think half of it is because he understood the pace. He was constantly bombarded by crowds. How many of you have so many followers, have so many noises? And he said the healthy thing to do is in the midst of all this noise, so they don't get to you, they don't design who you are, you don't let them infiltrate. Sometimes you need to withdraw from the noise and unhurry yourself. And really interesting about the book of Mark is Mark always writes this way, immediately. Like Jesus went to this, went to that. Doesn't even worry about the birth story of Jesus. He's just like, forget about it. Other people, they write about it. It's like they immediately. But the one thing Mark always says is that Jesus withdrew. Jesus went away. Jesus and the disciples went into a dark place. They went into the wilderness and prayed constantly. And it's probably because there's a way that we're designed to thrive. There's this word used in the Bible called Sabbath. Sabbath literally means rest. That's all it means. There's nothing super spiritual about it. You can't rest, though, and be hurried, can you? But you can be busy and unhurried, with the prime intent on going back to the source of our being, God himself. John Mark Comer, he's a pastor in the States, says this: the point is that there is a way the Creator set the creation up to thrive, a way that God set you up to thrive. And when we Sabbath, we tap into God's rhythm for human flourishing. Right at the creation account, day 1, bam, I made something. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, made something. Seventh day, he separated it as a day of rest. There is this passage in Deuteronomy, it talks about these people going away and rest. Here's the thing, the Bible uses a specific word to describe Sabbath, and it's this: holy. Holy, separate, different than everything else. That it's meant to look different from everything else you do. This holy day, this separated day, is meant to bring some sort of idea that you are more than what you produce. It's designed to remind us that the best things we can receive from God comes from grace and not work. You can't work yourself into better favor with Jesus. You can't work yourself into better forgiveness. It's all by grace. And resting reminds you that I don't have to work to mean anything. I'm already everything to God. And his grace is sufficient. How many of you feel like you are sufficient? And so this rest is meant to be holy. It's talking about this book in Deuteronomy, and it's talking about these Israelites who were slaves. And he tells them a commandment: go have a Sabbath. Go get away. Why? Because they went 400 years as slaves without vacation. There was never a day off. There was always something more to do. The consequence, they were no longer considered persons, but slaves. They saw themselves as just workers, not persons, created in the very image of God, as loved people. See, most of us wouldn't have a problem taking a day off. In fact, some of you probably do your best work on the weekends. But here's what we don't notice. We're always working on ourselves, aren't we? Like, we're always seeking affirmation. We're always seeking information, connection, validation, identity. And all this, over time, is making us neglect the very thing that can bring balance back again. Rest. To be unhurried. There's this guy named Rich. He says this: ultimately, we don't keep the Sabbath keeps us. It's one of God's gifts to us that protects us against the exhaustion of body and soul. We cannot think that the hurried life is better. Because according to the Bible, it is contrary to the Jesus way. Contrast with the other people in the parable. If you read 15 to 19, it says the seeds that fell on the footpath represent those who hear the message, only have Satan come at once and take it away. The seed on the rocky soil represents those who hear the message and immediately receive it with joy, but since they don't have deep roots, they don't last long. They fall away as soon as they have problems or are persecuted for believing God's word. Then there's others, all too quickly the message is crowded out by the worries of this life, the lure of wealth, and the desire for other things, so no fruit is produced. They're distracted, they're in a hurry, they're not even on the same page, and they're worried about life. They're exploited by Satan, by worry, and by the pressures of now. And they move so fast without noticing it, they're missing out on the very life of Jesus. There's a sense of impermanence in all of this. We can't believe the lie that the hurried life is the better life. What it does ultimately is that it shapes you into a hurried person, a plant, which is frequently moved but never grows strong. Contrast it with those who heard it. They produced a harvest of 30, 60, or even 100 times as much has been planted. That's for you. That's for you and those of us who decide, I will not go hurried. I will go at the pace of Jesus. I will take time to know him. Let me give you an example. You guys remember magic eyes? You got to squint your eye to find something. I was never able to do it. There's a 3D dove in here, by the way. The thing about the magic eyes, though, is that you have to sit and look at it for a long while. You got to work at it. You just do the weird things with your eyes, right? My kids are like, will this help, right? And you take pictures and you post it online because other people laugh at them. And so, you do those things. That's why you have kids. And you need to take time to look at it. It's a good reminder to us that honestly, the best things in life, the things that bring the most quality of living to you, do you recognize that all of them are actually unhurried? Think about hospitality when someone welcomes you into their home. That's an unhurried practice. Think about deep relationships. Yeah, like me and my wife, we use a lot of gifts between each other. But if we did that all the time, there would be zero relationship. It's purely based on convenience. Deep relationships take time. Marriages are unhurried. To study, to know something well, that's unhurried. Healing takes time. Restoration is unhurried. Connection is unhurried. Following Jesus is unhurried. The best things in life are unhurried. So why aren't we doing that? And I want to remind you that what Jesus is also saying is this, is that he's not going to hurry with you. He's not going to overpass you. He's not going to push you out of things. This is why I have the manger up here. Jesus came as a baby. They knew he was going to come to save the world. No baby's going to wield a sword. They literally had to wait 30 years for him to do something about it. And that was after 40 years of silence from God. He's telling us, it's not on your pace. It's on my pace. Would you submit yourself to my pace? To learn the practice of the unhurried following Jesus life. How do we do this? Well, when it comes to your relationship with Jesus, can I give you a few ideas? The only way you're going to notice Jesus is if you unhurry yourself. If there's somewhere in your life where he is working, where do you think that would be? It's a good question to ask yourself. If he were to be saying something to you, what would it be? And I'll say this, if you don't know where that is, it's a good indicator that you've not unhurried your life enough. We need to do as the followers did, is get away from the busyness and the noise, to disconnect and ask, Jesus, where are you working? Where am I noticing you? Because here's the thing. I'm certain that God who began the good work within you will continue this work until it's finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. He's not returned yet, so he's still got work in you to do. He's going to be working something in you. Whenever you're in your place, God, where are you? He's like, yo, I'm working on you. Just give it time. It's not on your pace, it's on my pace, yo. But have you taken time to ask me, where are you working? Remember, he's not working on your pace. He's teaching you the quality of being unhurried. This is how character formation works. It's slow, it's patient, it sucks. But that's the best kind of work. What could Jesus be wrestling into you and wrestling out of you at this point in your life? And are you responding to it? That's on you. But until you disconnect and find a moment of unhurry in your week, you'll never know it, and you'll always be wondering, God, are you even talking to me? This is I'll be super honest with you. 2 months ago, we did this series on goal setting. And throughout the series, I feel like God was like almost convicting me. He's like, Thomas, you're telling all these people to set goals, and I've set certain goals and reaching them. He's like, but you know what you don't have control of? I'm like, what's that? He's like, your diet. And I'm like, shut up. He's like, can you control your hunger? And I'm like, no, there's chocolate in the world. No one can control your hunger when there's chocolate, right? Like, why'd you make it? And I realized I had a huge issue. And I was like, I'm telling you to do something. And I'm like, I've not challenged myself to do that. And I had to work super hard. And like, I've seen the benefit of it. I've lost 17 pounds. But, I say that for this. Because even in my diet, Jesus wanted to say something. But you know what he's saying? He wasn't saying just lose weight, just lose weight. He's like, no, can you experience peace in your hunger? Can you experience peace even when your life seems unresolved in that moment? And that was the practice for me. For yourself. A good question to be asking yourself is, how are you doing? Have you unhurried your life enough to ask yourself, am I happy? There's this psalm, it says this, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Basically, what is going on inside of me, and can you lead me to life? Have you asked him this lately at all? Because like we see in Mark, when you move away to learn more about God, you learn more about who you are as well. And he leads you to life, not punishment. Are you happy with who you are? Let me ask you, are you enough? Do you know that in our weakness, that's where he's made strong? Do you know he says that his grace is sufficient for you? The work of the Christian is this, is to fight lies and believe truth. So what lies do you need to fight in your life, and what truths do you need to start believing in your life? Unless you disconnect, unhurry yourself, and ask yourself this question, you'll always be wondering, who am I? Am I enough? It's a place where Jesus won't hurry himself with you, and he'll be speaking the things that he's been wanting to say to you. And lastly, with others, you ask this question, is this convenience or is this connection? Are you producing the opportunity for other people to thrive in your life? Oh man, that's a hard question. Are you hospitable to people? Are you connecting with people? Or are you more focused on your phone than you are the person in front of you? Are you someone when someone can find peace and life from because of the way that you are unhurried? I think one of the greatest gospels that we can present to people is the concept of not being hurried, of spending time with people. Because what it says, you produce fruit. And what if you being unhurried, as it brings life to you, other people start looking up and going, I want what you have. And explain to them, honestly, I hate it. But I'm recognizing that as I follow Jesus, I become less and less hurried. And I become more and more in touch with who he is and who I am. Unless we unhurry our pace, guys, I feel like we're letting the enemy steal, kill, and destroy something instead of experiencing the life that Jesus promises us. So let me pray for you. God, I thank you that this is a message that you have been like running over my mind for a long time. But God, I pray that what we don't recognize is more things that we have to do. What we recognize from here is something we can be, and that is unhurried with you. That you're waiting for us to stop, to just hear you, to notice what you're doing in us, to notice what you're doing in the people around us. You're not pushing a pace. You are sovereign over our life and over this world, and help us to find rest in you. Jesus, help us not to become distracted by the things that are ruining the things that bring quality. But Jesus, help us as we follow you to connect at a pace where we're finding life. Help us to be those counterintuitive people that do the hard thing, that bring the best things to this world. Amen. Guys, thanks for hanging out tonight. Thanks for hearing me out. We'll see you next week as we connect a point you don't want to miss out, and as we finish our series, Good Medicine. Guys, have a good one.